Hey, thank you for joining us. This is our monthly Wolff training session. We're glad you're here. Be sure to comment and let us know where you're watching from. I've got the comments here on my phone, so we'll be monitoring for questions and all of that as well. My name is Caleb Sneed. I do sales and marketing here at Wolff Industries, and this is Glen Burke. He is our master sharpener and trainer here. We're continuing our series. We've kind of snowballed a few sessions have brought up questions that we've wanted to address. One of the topics we're covering today is hand corrugation, and that specifically comes from Tim Mansfield, and I know he's watching because I saw his comment in here. So this is for you, Tim. We're also going to be looking at cast versus forged, how to tell the difference between the two, and why you need to know that difference, what's important between those two, and then how that will affect some of the repairs that you'll be doing, like handle bending and things like that.
Yes, sir. So
Glen's going to get into the nitty-gritty here in just a little bit. I'm going to jump back and monitor the camera and some of the questions that we have going. So we're going to jump into it. Thanks, guys, for watching with us. Be sure to jump in the comments and let us know what you'd like to see, and we'll see if we can get those issues addressed.
all right. Cool. The fun thing about trying to decide if a shear is cast or forged is you can know a little bit, and it might get you in trouble. When I first started sharpening, I broke 3 shears the first year I was in business. Now, most of those were just trying to put set in a cast shear and being ignorant of the fact that there was a difference between cast and forged. I was learning the hard way, but I was learning well. The second year, I only broke 2 shears, and my third year in business, I only broke 1. As I started to look more closely to the telltale signs between a forged and a cast shear, and hopefully we can do that a little bit here this morning. Let's look at one of the telltale signs of a cast shear. I'm going to slip over here to the close-up camera, Dan. I'm going to get a little pointer stick. If you can see this sharp lip right here, right at the beginning of, or behind what you could say, behind your right area, that sharp lip cannot be ground in. It's cast. So what you've got is a 90-degree ledge right here behind your right area. That is a very good sign of a cast shear. Another good sign of a cast shear is made in Taiwan. Another sign that would give me a hint that this shear is cast would be the raised area on both the thumb and the finger. Once the bumper gets, where you have to grind the bumper down to get the tips to cross, you run out of bumper, you could actually start taking metal off the raised area of the grips, put in a fresh bumper, and you'd have some bumper left because you've removed the metal removed the metal from the grips. That's typical of a cast shear. A forged shear, when we're looking at signs of a forged shear, you're going to notice a very smooth transition, a ground-in transition between the shank of the handle, okay, and your right area. It's very smooth. You've got maybe some grind marks also. Let's see if we can't get this in contrast. You can see where the grind is left behind, not as highly polished. This is a very high polished, but notice how smooth that transition is from your right area, from your handle into the right area. Good sign of a forged shear. There's this shear would cause me some doubts. You see a small ramp right here. It's not a sharp 90-degree angle. It's just very slight ramp. So I would think it might be cast. You see a real smooth transition here. I don't see any grind lines. It's very nice high polish. But as I'm turning it around, I get a hint of dissimilar metals, or maybe a weld line that's been polished in. Now, this particular shear, obviously from Kenchi, I can see just a very slight difference between the handle and the blade. If you can see that right here, there's just a real slight difference where the blade was welded to the handle. I've got a shear that shows this a little bit more distinctly. If you can see that spot right here. Now what they've done is they've taken a hardened steel blade, welded it to a softer handle. This doesn't mean that the blade is cast. It simply means that you would be able to bend the handle on the handle bender. I would also be a little concerned seeing that lip here and noticing there's very prominent raised areas on the grips. I wouldn't treat this as a cast shear. We'll play with it a little bit on the handle bender, but you can see a definite weld area. See where it was welded right here. And on the thumb, let me see the weld line right here. All right. When you're looking at cast or trying to decide whether or not the shear is cast and whether or not it's forged in order to manipulate the handles to get the tips to close further, you might have a tip that's very, very slight gap. Now this is a little exaggerated, but that point aside, the fact that there's a little exaggeration, the handles can be manipulated. If it's a cast shear, you'd have to maybe take a little bit off grind a little bit off the grips. You would have to maybe take a little bit off the length of the shear to get the cutting edges crossing. There's different ways that you can work with a cast shear. There's actually some inventions that are out now where you would heat up the handles and be able to manipulate a cast shear with the handles being hot. It does cause a lot of discoloration, and you'd have to do a lot of finish work to clean that up. But if there's any doubt, just go slow, be careful. We're going to show that with the handle bending, but let's look at doing some hand corrugating. Then we'll go back to the handle bender and what to do and what not to do with your cast shears. What I've got is a grooming shear, and I've got some corrugations on here. Dan, if we can look at it close here. There's corrugation. Now, if there's a nick in this blade from grooming shear hitting the floor, nick the bevel, you've got to replace that corrugation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen the corrugated blade first. turn this on. How's that? Does that hear me a little better now?
I got you right.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, and I didn't get all the corrugations off. I want to do that. All right. Now I'm going to leave that burr on there. We can go to the down camera. I was going to show that the corrugations are gone. Nice, clean. Damage would be gone. We got burr on the inside. Now I'm going to clamp it into the pan of ice. Now this is pan of ice that we sell, and it's mounted to the countertop clamp that we sell also. This is going to serve, this countertop clamp is going to serve a dual purpose when it comes to the handle bending. We make these diamond files here at Wolff Industries. We make them in 72 tooth and a 48 tooth. Typically anything that's cutting hair, you're going to want to have the fine, the 72 teeth per inch. If anything like cutting leather or other types of hard cut materials, you may need the coarse, the 48 tooth. What I'm going to do, let me talk about the setup first. I've got this at a specific angle, the pan of ice at a specific angle, so that when I'm corrugating, I'm going to gauge whether or not I'm at the teeth or at the top of the bevel by how level my file is. So that when I'm corrugating, if I'm catching just the tip or just the cutting edge, then I want to tip my pan of ice back. If I'm hitting just the top of the bevel, I want to tip my pan of ice forward. This is just for a reference. If based on your lighting, if you need to tip it a certain way and you work better at a steeper angle, you go ahead and do that. But this is how, if you come here for a class, this is how I'm going to train you to do it. This will help you gauge whether or not you need to tip forward a little bit or tip back a little bit. Get my hand out of the way. So that you can get your corrugation. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to tip forward or bring my handle up a little bit. I want my corrugation on this front edge, my cutting edge first. And that's going to guide me with, if I need to have corrugation all the way across the bevel, I'll use that as a guide. And this is, I'll do half this blade and show you what I'm talking about. As I move over, I'm moving over half the width of the file. I don't have to use heavy pressure. And that way, half of the file is guiding the next cut. Now, get my glasses back on so I can see what I'm looking at here. You can see where I need to back up to it. There we go. you see where the first quarter edge of that bevel has been corrugated. Now what I'm going to do, what I typically do is I'll go back over this corrugation to make it look a little more uniform. But this is that leading edge that's going to guide the rest of my work. You can see where you can see distinctly each step. I want to try and blend that in a little bit more. Anytime I hand corrugated, I wanted to have it look as close to the factory as possible. The diamond file cuts going forward and back. Get my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Now the more I use the file, the deeper into the blade I'm going to go. You can see I'm starting to get a corrugation all the way across the bevel. Try and get this where the light working for me. There we go. Well, those are the steps that I would do to use the hand file. Again, you don't have to use a lot of pressure. The diameter will cut going both directions, and there might be time when you need to clean it out a little bit. But once you have the corrugation on, there's a real heavy burr. I don't suggest using the pink cone to clean it off. Because those burrs are sticking out this way, and it just may fill up the gap that you've cut, all the grooves, the notches that file cuts in. The burr would fill that up at the cutting edge. So what I would suggest you do is close and gently ease that burr off. Then I'll spread the blades apart and open. Clean the burr off, clean the blades a little bit. I'll close it again. I want to make sure that I cut the burr off. Now I'm ready to sharpen and hone the thumb blade. But that's hand corrugating, and I used the hand corrugators for all the years that I was a mobile sharpener, and they work great. I used a coarse corrugation, the 48 tooth on a barber shear, and got called back, and he said it was too clunky for him. It didn't move the hair like it was supposed to. I also got a comment from a barber, said, could you it was actually the very first shear that I corrugated. He said the last guy put the corrugation on the wrong blade. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't know which blade was the right blade, but I knew which one was the wrong one. So I just went to my vehicle, put a mark on the blade that needed to be corrugated, which happened to be the opposite of one that was already there. Sharpened, put the corrugation on, took the shear back in, and the barber was real happy with it. Just remember, if you're working with hair, the 72 tooth is what's preferred. Any comments, questions yet?
Yeah, we've got a few.
Okay.
We got Tim got a question. Real quickly, what's the difference between corrugation and serration?
The spelling, Tim, the spelling is different, but you're talking about the same thing. It really is.
Cool. Another
Yes.
from Tim. Corrugate perpendicular to the edge of the blade.
I do corrugate perpendicular to the blade. The purpose of the corrugation is to just slow the hair down or stop it from moving. It's whether it's corrugating corrugations for on an industrial shear for sharpening like Kevlar, it's always perpendicular.
Okay. I think we're okay right now. I think you
All
guys
right.
are doing the change
I'm
here.
going to change over to the handle bender.
And I just want to call some shout outs. Looks like we got some people watching from all over, so we appreciate it. Got Ken out in Utah, Connie in Canada. We got Simon in England. So we got people all over. So we appreciate it. Keep dropping down where you're from. I believe Brazil,
Wow.
Missouri. Yeah, so cool all over. Lazaro, unfortunately, we just speak English, but what we will do is when we get off the chat, when we get off the stream here, we'll do some translating on your statements there, and we'll get a response to you as at the end of it. Give us a little time to get everything processed on the video and get it posted, but we'll have some responses to your comments for sure. Cool. I think
All right.
I think we're good to go. The next section.
The handle bender comes with a great set of instructions. I'm not going to tell you anything different than what you're going to find right here. So if you get a handle bender, all your instructions are perfectly printed out right here with great pictures. You will be able to use this without having to watch me. These instructions are excellent. One thing that I do want to show you is the differences of some shears that I personally wouldn't use on the handle bender. One, this handle's plastic. All right, that's for you, Tim. You don't want to bend this. The other shears, this one's, you've got blind screws. This particular shear has a tapered screw, so you wouldn't be able to take this out. It's actually pan-headed, so you wouldn't be able to disassemble this, but you can actually see the heads of the ends of the screws polished on the face of the shear. Do you need me to show it on this? You can see, let me flip it over. The heads of the screws. You can see that it's the handle and the metal, or handle and the blades, two separate metals. You'd have to be very careful, but I would hesitate, because the shear is used in, the handle bender is used in this manner, where you are putting force on the blade as well as the handle. I would hesitate doing that on a two-part shear, because you may cause damage in this junction where they're put together. You would see that in this particularly, where the shears, the blade is screwed to the handle. Here's a particular shear that you have a zinc handle And in the zinc molding, there are no heads, no screw endings here. We had 2 posts that are actually molded with the handle, and those posts go up through the blade and then are, flattened out like a rivet. These are they're very fragile, these connections, and so I wouldn't be trying to bend this particular shear because it would cause a lot of force and may break here. So be careful that you don't have a 2-part shear. That way you're not causing any kind of damage. The other thing you don't want to do is try and bend a cast shear. These handles can be manipulated through removing the material off the bumper or material off the grips, but do not try and bend these. They can, and I'm going to do this, they can, I don't have a whole lot of shear left on there. If you can see that handle moving just a little tiny bit, it hasn't changed anything on the blade. I'm just in what's called the elasticity of the material. The elasticity would be like a spring. When it pulls out, it'd go back to its normal or its original position. I was thinking about having an aluminum can where you could dimple the can in and it would pop back out. That's playing within the elasticity. When you get into the plasticity of the metal, you've crossed a border, you've crossed a line, and unfortunately we don't see where that is. It's on this imaginary graph where you're applying a force, and all of a sudden you just go past the point of no return. With a cast shear, that sounds like ting. It's a bad feeling. You don't want to go past that point. You've seen it with a spring or with a slinky. Anybody that's played with slinkies, you know when you've gone past the point of the elasticity. You've stretched it beyond its return point. Now you've changed the molecular structure within the metal, and it doesn't go back to its original shape. It's sprung. Well, with a cast shear, when it's sprung, that means you're grinding tips off, or you've snapped a handle. You're replacing a shear, basically. I actually was working with a cast shear, and it wasn't cutting at the tip. It was brand new shear, and so all I did was put it to the table, and I was flexing the blade. Now, it just needed a little tiny bit of movement to start cutting at the tip, and I test cut again, and it still wasn't working, so I switched to the opposite blade, and as soon as I pushed down with my thumb, it snapped, but it snapped right under my thumb, right at the tension hardware. So again, you can move it a little bit, but if you feel in resistance that I suggest get some practice shears and make sure one of them's cast, and break one. Just try and move it. Try and make some changes to the position of the tips. Once you hear that snap, that's a great learning point. This is a cast shear. If I needed to move the tips closer together, if I have a gap in my tips, come on, there we go. If I have a gap in my tips like this, and I need to move my tips closer together, I'm going to first remove any kind of finger inserts that would be in here, because once this tension starts to be applied to the grip, I don't want to break somebody's finger insert. I want my fulcrum to be in the center of my handle. So if I'm not in the center, then I'm going to move position of my handle. And that was further away, wasn't it, Glenn? That's the closest I can get. Now, you can move the thumb, or you can move the finger. This one, because of the finger positioning, I'm going to go ahead and go with the thumb. And the instructions are beautiful. The picture is great too. I don't know if you can see that. I'm just going to use 2 fingers. And I'm just moving it ever so slightly. Now, without losing the shear, you can see that I've already moved this handle. I'm going to pick it back up here to where my tips now, the cutting edges are overlapping. All right. If you have that situation, then you bend it in the opposite direction. And I'm going to open the shear, and I can turn my clamp or my stop to the opposite side, and now went too far. Now I got to go back. A little bit more. I can probably go a little bit more. I think I went too far. Oh. That's good. I like that. That's the handle bender. That's a beauty shear. It'll handle bigger shears. Again, if I need to move the tips closer together. Oops, if I get it on the right side of the fulcrum. I'll leave the blades together. A little much thicker handle, so I'm going to you can see that the tips have moved a little bit closer. But if you're going to need to move the tips farther apart, open it up and bend the grips closer to one another. Any questions on that?
One earlier. Give me a second to find it.
All right.
Maybe I should move the camera back to where we can ask questions, huh?
More of a comment than a question.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wanted to call this out earlier. He's talking about checking between cast and forge using a file.
I understand. I've tried that before myself. I've actually used my diamond file and just to see if it grabs, and that is a good test. And I wouldn't use a bastard file that's far too coarse. You could use a finish or fine tooth. And you don't have to make a whole cut on there. If it starts to grab, yeah, that's a fairly soft metal. If it wants to skip very easy, then it's a much harder, and you can pretty well say that that's a cast handle. The downside of that is you're going to leave a little scratch on it. Doesn't mean you can't polish it out or make that better. But you're not going to be able to do that on anything that's anodized, which, for obvious reasons. But I really hesitate trying to trust in the file, just because I don't like making marks that I really can't take out. If you did use that, I would try to be on the inside of the handle. I'm not going to do anything on the outside where it's more visible. Certainly you could test on the inside. This particular shear, it's catching, but if you can see, got the down one down, there we go. See the little scratches that it's put in. And I would want to clean that up. I don't like marking up someone's shear. The cast, though, it's going to want to skip easily. I did that on the outside. I told you I want to do it on the inside. It's not going to want to bite. So you can use a file. I just don't like making a mark on the shears.
All right, we just had a question come through from Bill. For small adjustment in a scissor with a bumper, is it okay to shave or grind the bumper first?
It depends on how much bumper you have. This particular shear, you can tell that the bumper has already been removed quite a bit.
Dan, cut that.
It's gonna depend on how much the tip has to move. If it's another thing about the bumpers is if this is a screw-in bumper, I don't like taking anything off of these, just because there's so little left. There's so little material between that and the head of the screw. You can remove the bumper. It depends on how much that tip has to move. If you make your test cut and it physically looks like the cutting edges are crossing one another, but it's still catching a little tiny bit at the tip, I would either touch the tip on the sharpening, whether you're using the Comic Gold or you're using the Shear to touch the tip. Maybe there's a little bit of burr left on here that's catching, or you can just kiss that bumper. Yes, using the bumper to adjust if there's a little bit to move, but if there's a lot to move, you'd want to manipulate the handle.
Okay. I'm gonna see if we got a few more questions coming in here. We're gonna look at this one real quick. You can say what you think about that. I'm just kind of scrolling through. While you think about that, we've got Tim asked, "What's next month's subject?" We don't know yet, so let us know something. Something you'd like to see.
Get up with us about that. We do have a guard over on the big handle bender. If they want to see that, I can show them what happens with the zinc handles if you want to go get that.
Okay. Is it something I can bring in
it's
here?
just a little plastic shield that's over the top of that.
Okay. So what we're talking about here is we had somebody send us a text message asking if we could show what happens when you break a shear. But we want to make sure that we are doing it safely. So Dan can monitor the questions and comments, and Glen can tell a story about breaking some scissors while I go run and grab the safety shield, because it would be beneficial and helpful to see where that
I will show you where
point
it goes
is
bad.
that is too far. So somebody asked what the cost of the handle bender is. I think Bill Pierce can jump in there and answer that question. I'll be right back.
One of the things, one of our shows here at Wolff Industries, I was on the handle bender in the showroom or on our production floor, and I just put a shear on there, and I think there was a picture of me just bending it in a 90-degree angle while everybody around me in that picture was jumping away, afraid it was going to break. This is that zinc handle that I was talking about. I'm going to take it like this. Now, it could have been adjusted, but I wanted to see where it was going to snap. The zinc is very, very soft. The cast, on the other hand, are we able to see through that?
Yeah, we can see through that.
All right. Dan is going to abandon his post. Now, I don't have enough on this shear. There's a blade, a swivel thumb blade right there. Yep. Now, this,
You'll have to slide this back.
this particular shear I want to make sure that we can see it moving. Can you see it flexing?
Yeah.
And springing back? But you go too far, and it didn't take much for that to reach the edge of the elasticity and plasticity of the shear. This particular case, you'd be getting somebody a new swivel thumb. And that's for you, Bill.
I had to put on my safety glasses for that one.
There are videos put out by, if I could, with honor, say the old timers, where they would show how to weld that handle back on. I didn't have that experience. I didn't have the equipment, so I would simply open up my case and go, in the process of repairing your shear, it didn't want to be repaired, and I broke it. Which shear do you want? And I would open up my case and let them choose whatever shear they wanted. Again, in all the years I was sharpening, I broke very, very few shears, and it was out of ignorance. But be prepared to handle it honorably. You know, if it happens, it's going to happen. If you break something, honor it. If they say they don't want anything that you got, they want it replaced with the exact same shear, bite it. Can you get that shear for them? You're in for this. You're in for a long haul, and you would gain more by honoring that stylist, that barber, that industrial shear, whatever you broke. Honor yourself by doing the right thing. Pay it back, and you'll gain more than just a customer. You'll gain a lifetime, hopefully a lifetime friend.
All right, so we're looking through. We actually having some people drop in suggestions.
Good.
Maybe next time we'll look at set. Maybe that's something we can do next month. Been a while since we've kind of touched on that. So we do have a question here from Bill. Bill Lynn, he says, what about adjusting the blades if they spring laterally? The rod misses in a place after sharpening.
Okay. The blades. Oh, you're talking about if it misses somewhere in the center of the blade here. That's going to be a set issue. It could also be just an area where the burr hasn't been removed properly. It could be, if it's a beauty shear, it could be where the ride line hasn't been properly put in. There are different reasons why it's missing, where it'll cut, miss, and then cut. Most of the time, it's going to be a burr that hasn't been removed properly. It could be where it's maybe over polished, or where you've radiused your cutting edge in one spot or another. Take a good look at your work first before you start manipulating the shear. Make sure your work is done properly. If it comes to a point where the shear has been sharpened so much, I don't know if you can do the drop down, you can see that this blade there's a lot of material that's been removed out of this blade. Being in the classroom, they get sharpened a lot before they're used, or they're obviously never used, but these blades, there's a lot removed out of them. And so the reason I keep using them is they present unique problems to the sharpener. One of them is definitely bending or skipping in the cut. But that's going to be, like I said, check your work first before you start looking at set. You can look at set, particularly how the blades close against one another, watching that contact point all the way down the blade with a good strong backlight. But you're watching that contact point, and if you see that contact point disappear, obviously it's a set issue. But if you have good, you can hear, you can feel good blade contact all the way down, then check your work.
I think that's a good introduction to next month. So let's do set for next month, because that does tie into everything we've manipulated today.
Yes.
And it is an important issue to look at. So we'll do that for next month. It's going to be the last Monday of the month. That is going to be August. I'm looking here on my calendar. August 31st. So August 31st, last day of August. We'll be back in here and we will work on set. I'm gonna jump back here. We're gonna check and just see if there's any last minute questions here. Looks like everybody's want to learn set next month, so that's awesome. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you for letting us know where you're at. If you're watching this after the live stream, after this is posted, put your questions in the comments and we will get those answered to you. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hope this was educational and informative.
Yes.
And we will see you next month, same time, same place.
All right.
Cool.